My name is Natalie Hreezy. I am the Vice President of Substitutes with United Educators of San Francisco. We're just going to have a short press conference today, hearing from a few of the leaders in our local and state unions, as well as at the school site here. So I'm going to start by introducing Cassandra Curiel. She is the President of United Educators of San Francisco and a middle school educator.
Thanks, Leslie. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Glad to see you here. We've had a really wonderful afternoon at MLK and morning program. I'm also happy to be here with our affiliates, CFT, Jeff Freitas, and with our educators at the school site and our principals. We've been having a rough year and 9 months. And in this time, it has become and should be ever more apparent that the services and the structures of our school district and the folks that work in our schools are the most important resources to our students. We really came to talk today and to learn more about community schools and the structures that are unique to each one, particularly here at MLK, listening and hearing from students, and the impact of the structures of community schools was even more important to hear from how they're doing and how they feel their school year is going. This is why we're so concerned that the budget cuts that are being proposed by the Board of Ed are a terrible idea when it comes to the deep cuts that could hurt the communities and the students and families at a time when our students have never needed more. In the past year, we've seen parents, teachers, and students, school staff, and the community working together to help kids get through these unprecedented times. The pandemic has led to worsening trauma, bereavement, even more highlights on hunger, poverty, and learning challenges for so many of our students. Educators in schools have worked hand in hand with parents and families to meet students' needs wherever we can, from bridging the digital divide and helping families facing food and housing insecurity. It hasn't been easy, but we've done it together. And we've been working hard together to welcome children back to school and keeping them coming to school and giving them supports and services they need to start recovering. And now when our kids have never needed their schools and services more, the district is pushing an austerity plan that would have a fierce and overly intense cut to almost every single school. When we talk about 10% budget cuts, this means almost impossible choices for the school staff, the administration, for families and SSCs, for community partners that would otherwise have a say in the kinds of ways that budgets are spent. Choices like deciding whether to keep a social worker or a literacy coach. These are choices that could lead to perhaps class size increase even. These choices in some schools and that are likely to continue are unfair to put on a school community. And here particularly when we're talking about a community school like MLK and the kinds of resources that are brought in by community school coordinators and those two positions being on the chopping block, we're talking about critical services to students and to schools, both educators and families alike, that are integral parts of how these schools have come to wrap around services for the whole child. It is so critical that these positions and that these services continue at the schools that have built the infrastructure and the trust with the family and the community to do this hard work, but very, very necessary parts of their community. I'm gonna pass the mic over to Leslie and have her say some words.
Thank you, Cassandra. We'll next hear from Leslie Hu. She's a community school coordinator at Martin Luther King Middle School and the Secretary of United Educators of San Francisco. Welcome, Leslie.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Leslie Hu. I am the community school coordinator at Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Academic Middle School, as well as the Secretary of UESF. I am standing here to say that I'm standing in solidarity and amplifying our young people. I just spent the last hour listening to our young people talk about what their dream school is and what they want now that they've transitioned back to in-person. And you want to know what they talked about? They talked about the bathrooms. They talked about how they have broken mirrors. They talked about how they wanted to fix the locks on the doors. These are the kind of things that are happening in our public schools after decades of undervaluing and underfunding our public schools. And now our district management is proposing to cut even more from our young people. Our educators are cracking. At MLK this year, we have about 55-ish staff, and there were days where we had 20 plus staff out with 0 substitutes. We cannot continue this. And to think that there are people out there who think it's okay to cut more people from our school communities when we are just trying to have a space for our young people to thrive and grow. And this is the conversation that is happening right now. This is what we're fighting for, is our young people to feel safe, to feel valued, to have the caring grown-ups that they deserve in order to learn and grow. And in this last hour, what we talked about, what we created space for, was for young people to provide leadership and to have their voice be at the center of the work that we do. That is exactly what community schools are. And there's a vision for that. We have a vision for that. And right now, nobody wants to actually go to that vision and center our young people. In fact, we have to fight for crumbs. We have to fight for community schools. This is what we're fighting for. It's already been made public that community schools and peer resources, these two fundamental things to center our young people, have been cut. There's no commitment to actually fund these kind of programs ongoing. In fact, they're proposing to completely eliminate it. And what we are doing is we were standing up in solidarity with our young people. I'm in this room and standing in solidarity with our amazing parents, our amazing educators, our amazing community partners, and our board, standing in solidarity with our young people right now. And they deserve more than what our management is proposing. So I urge you all to really think about what it is our young people deserve and how our budget is reflecting that. Because it's not right now with the budget they're proposing. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. I'll just remind everyone that we are having a rally as the Board of Education votes tomorrow from 5 to 7 p.m. at 555 Franklin Street. So I would encourage everyone to come out with your coworkers and friends and be there. Next, we'll hear from Michael Estienne, who is the principal of Martin Luther King School and also the president of United Administrators of San Francisco. Please welcome Michael.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I'm not going to echo the things that were said earlier by Cassandra and also Leslie. I'm just going to give you the context of what's happening here at MLK Middle School. Because I've been here for 9 years as assistant principal, and then I became the principal 7 years ago at the same time that I hired Leslie so that we can transition to be a community school. So MLK has been a community school now for 7 years going. The context, prior to me being hired the year before as the assistant principal, there's an article in the newspaper that talked about there were approximately 150 phone calls made from this school site to the police department. For the police department to come to the school. We're talking about approximately 150 phone calls. That's what Leslie and I inherited when we walked into the building. We were at crisis mode. How do you handle these issues? This is not an academic issue. The challenges that we're facing in schools across this nation, it's not an academic issue, although districts will want to make it a conversation around academic issues. There are things happening in our community that then come into our campus. We talk about food issues, housing insecurity, conflict in community. How do you address a hungry kid seated in your classroom? How do you address a child who is couch surfing, where they're sleeping from couch to couch and now that child is seated in a math class trying to learn. Well, we understood that if we're going to address the academic outcomes, we need to use the more global perspective of the community school model, where we can partner with a variety of agencies to address the issues that we've identified our students and families have here at MLK. Because in the community school model, what we do know is this: if you have a child, you don't just have a child, you have a family. Whatever is occurring at home, whatever is occurring when they leave here between here and home in the community, that impacts us. Who can address that? Are my content teachers supposed to do that? No, they can't. They're not trained to do it. The community school model allows us to be nuanced enough to assess the needs of our students and families, and then partner with the agencies to come into the building to meet those needs. What has not been said here is that MLK partners with over 50 different agencies to do a variety of things to meet a variety of needs. Why is this important? Because this is really not about MLK, but the community schools model, which is being chopped. Compton Unified lost a lawsuit in 2015. Schools now are on the hook for treating trauma inside the building. Trauma that students experience at home, in their community, now has to be addressed inside the school site. This is why State Superintendent Tony Thurmond allocated $300 million last year for schools this year to implement community schools. This is why Governor Newsom has now allocated an additional $3 billion for us to advocate for community schools inside schools in the state of California. Why am I here? Community schools cannot be on the chopping block. Peer resources also cannot be on the chopping block. And the fact that we're holding a conversation that is counter the direction of the state speaks volumes to how we're thinking about our budget deficit. And something is amiss when we're not aligned to meeting the needs of our most vulnerable. Anybody will come to me, I will tell you immediately, you cannot under any circumstances, it should be a non-negotiable, cut community schools from any building, anywhere in SFUSD. I stand in solidarity with UESF around this issue. Power to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for providing that really critical context. Before we hear from our last speaker, I just want to say that one of the things we did today was to meet with another community school, Buena Vista, Horace Mann, and president of the American Federation of Teachers, Randy Weingarten, and our next speaker, the president of California Federation of Teachers, Jeff Freitas, joined us in that discussion, and then in the discussions that continued here at Martin Luther King School. These are the critical discussions that need to happen about how we expand the struggle for community schools and schools that serve our students, and we are so appreciative that both Jeff and Randy can join us in these discussions in this struggle. Please welcome Jeff Freitas.
This off properly. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for those powerful words, Principal. And having been a high school math teacher, I thought you were a community partner in there, not the principal. I love that you're a part of this fight, having administration there. So that demonstrates exactly what's going on here. This is not educators against administrators. This isn't students against educators or against administrators. This is everybody united on this message to fight for this funding. So. President of CFT, also AFT Vice President, I want to thank Randy Weingarten for helping put this together and making this priority at the national level. This is a priority at the California level, and this is a priority at the local level, obviously. We are organizing behind this, and the community school message is just a small part of the cuts that are happening in San Francisco that we need to push back and correct. It is so important what we're doing at this school and at Buena Vista Middle School as well, that's just signaling what they want to do broadly. It's not what we need to eliminate, it's what we need to expand. And what I've learned today in the multiple meetings that I've seen, like was mentioned before, the students were talking about improving the bathrooms. I asked, if we had won the lottery, and the lottery I think is like $200 million right now, and only this school had got it, what would you improve? What would you build? What would you create? And they talked about bathrooms. We're not meeting the basic needs, and they're talking about cutting even more. They're talking about 300 people being cut, 300 educators at the site level being cut. And that's what we need to fix. And that's what this is about. That's what the alternative proposal's about. That's what we're looking at other school districts at about the same size. Where did they put their money? They put their money at the site level, at the school level, with the students, with the educators, with the principals, to make sure that these programs can continue, whether they're community schools or not. And they need to focus to expand community schools. There was money that was mentioned. The federal government's looking to try to pass $400 million. $400 million at the national level. There's $3 billion that's already been promised at the state level. We are looking to expand community schools not only throughout the state but throughout this country. Why would we be eliminated in San Francisco, in the poorest communities in the city? That is the wrong message. We shouldn't be eliminating any programs at the school site, and that's why there's this alternative budget that has been proposed, and that's why UESF, CFT, AFT, and many other partners support that alternative budget, and that's the important part here. As my phone keeps sliding, I want to look down at my notes and just make sure that I'm cutting everything. That not only is there money towards community schools, but there's ongoing increased funding at the state level, and we need to look at that as well. It is not a time for austerity budgets. It is a time to build the services that we need to provide in our education system, especially after coming back from COVID, especially after distance learning for these students. We need to be providing more mental health, physical health services and supports to these kids. We need to be providing more additional academic supports for these kids, not fewer. Not fewer people, not fewer classified, not fewer teachers, not fewer administrators at the site level. We need more of these counselors, these social workers. We need more, not fewer. And that's what we're talking about. And again, that's what we are fighting. So we are with you, UESF. Both the AFT and CFT are with you. We are with you at this school site. This is what we need to expand, not narrow. And we are with all of you to make sure that we can keep our school at San Francisco USD moving forward into the future in the right way to support our communities. Thank you.